Philosophers talk to their times. Spinoza wants to have a word with me. I heard that yesterday you attempted to use old Aristotle to explain that modernest of tragedies, while the most vulnerable and wicked of men become the great leaders and are deified. Why? Why would you do such a thing? Aristotle was fine in his way, but that union he has between what he calls theology, which is merely desire rebranded. Theology, then, that smuggles into what he is trying to prove. It's proof. He smuggles in the thing itself into what he is trying to prove. So that life is merely because you have a living property. That fallacy, then. You attempt to use that and its alliance with form that cannot tell things of reason like circles from things of life. That fallacy, to understand the most essential and tragic of mysteries, why our leaders are such fallen humans. The more so, the more power that they claim, and why so many call for them. Let me explain properly, or do not do it at all. I noticed yesterday you had an adequate explanation of that great phenomena, the male flirt, who works by inciting in the minds of those who wish to flirt with a very strong image that is practically a desire. They therefore have a certain personability that really accords, but just doesn't accord, that incites the sympathy of the female soul, so that they remind them, if you like, of their own desires for dress and for grooming. But more than that, more than therefore their own personal charms, to be a true flirt, you also have to have a vulnerability, so that the image is not, or that the image that others have of you is somehow weak. It needs looking after. In these two facets, they do indeed share with those who would be the great leaders. But I will explain that in a while. For now, let us carry on. A flirt works by counterpoising that image. They will always banter and tease against it. So those victims they are latching onto, the women who they are flirting with, who are no doubt enjoying their company, will find their very image of the person slightly challenged, and in that challenge will be fascinated. That then is the flirt. We may understand it. Male flirts are ten a penny. Tyrants, luckily, are far less common. So how does a tyrant fare? A tyrant shares with a flirt a vulnerability. The idea of them feels vulnerable in the mind of those that hold it. They therefore feel like every man, for every man feels vulnerable. They will feel like the little guy until you think who and what they are. But they have so many more facets, so many more points by which their tyranny grows. First of all, they will have to have made an impact before ever they became a tyrant upon the minds of those who will acclaim them in afterlife. Now, this must be done by longevity. Politicians come and politicians go, but tyrants are the beats of life. And across, always hearing them again and again and again for 20 to 30 years, the same arguments. Those arguments gain a validity that is not a justification, that is beyond any of their logic. It becomes a validity in itself and for itself. The arguments, therefore, have to be familiar by dint of repetition. More than that, it helps that if some of those arguments are not always absolutely stupid, The best of tyrants, then, will always say one or two things, always make one or two cases that could almost be true, almost right. And that is the point. In many ways, that is their danger. If tyrants only spoke stupidity, we would have ignored them long ago. No, the darkness grows in our souls because sometimes they were right. So we have then an image of a man who is vulnerable, who has been forever there, who is sometimes right. More than that, you must remember that men like to feel the powerful are on their side, because then they can breed in that idea of power they have of such men, such great individuals, that their own vanity, I mean their supporters' vanity, will make feel so much greater than it is, because in the light of that power reflects on their lives. These poor souls, these normal men, will also feel all the more powerful. They will big up the least of men then, if by that they can make themselves feel all the greater. And there you have it. All the ingredients you need to explain the tyrant. Ideas that have been endlessly repeated. Even if they are valueless, they somehow gain a currency by that repetition. A man who is vulnerable, who is weak, whose idea needs to be incites then a sympathy that welcomes people, those who are susceptible to this kind of tyrant. And all tyrants work on certain populations. That is why they are so divisive. They work on those populations that see in the individual something for sympathy. An idea, a little man, somebody who needs to be protected, whose vanity must be explained, understood, allowed for. All the more so, as I find, most tyrants have very little idea of who they are. And I agree with what you said about Aristotle yesterday. They exist as they are reflected in others' minds, but their peculiar gift is to use the sympathy of others to excite that, to make their followers then want to create them. They use then sympathy and their very vulnerability, and then that vulnerability of their followers to listen and to want power, to create something that is not inhuman anymore, a strange amalgam where the followers need them to be powerful so that their own vulnerabilities are met, and therefore foster their images in their minds, set them up as gods in order to hide their very vulnerability. Such leaders are not human. They never were. If you look at them in their humanity, no doubt they are silly, space, foolish individuals, scarred by war or upbringing. Such leaders in themselves are nothing. The point is they exist in their followers' minds, and in followers' minds they are Greek gods, capricious, foolish, ultimately flawed, but all the more powerful and dangerous for that. And why so powerful? Why so dangerous? Well, their followers will close their minds to reason, utterly and forever. They cannot see their idols as they are, as fools of shit and blood, but must rather see them as they want them to be, as their own sympathy for the fallen individuals that they worship has created them in their minds. That then is the danger. To attack such tyrants is to rise up this sympathy. It is in that their invulnerability lies. It is through that we become imprisoned. So yes, the form of a tyrant exists in the mind of the follower, less in the tyrant themselves. They merely need the followers. It is the followers through their sympathy that create and incite the image, and they do it to feel power for themselves. They do it in spite of what the tyrant actually says, and the fact that in the end the tyrant might come for them. For in that moment of glory, where they help an individual, flawed like they are, small like they are, ascend to godhood, they feel themselves as if they too were powerful. This is the tragedy of my times and of yours, the tragedy of tyranny. The tyrants are made not by great men saying great words, or by great deeds, or even by great ideas. No, no, no! All tyrants, I find, are mere popinjays, things of silk and gold. The real tyrants, I tell you, the real darkness lies not in them. Oh no, it lies in you and me, the souls of those who follow them, and do so in spite of their folly and their stupidity. Nay, in the last gasp, because of it.